Day. I want to thank Superintendent Harris and the deputy chiefs and the commanders who are responsible for the police department and the safety and security of the people of the city of New Orleans. Sometimes there are moments when the world seems like it has gone crazy. As we look at world events this weekend, of course, our thoughts and our prayers go out to all of the people in London who are working through a very difficult terrorist attack. But we have our problems here at home as well. We have had this weekend a number of different murders, shootings, and carjackings. It occurs to me all the time when we have difficult circumstances that when people get afraid, when we begin to feel uneasy with each other, we begin to point fingers. But blame is a pathway to nowhere. But as I have said many, many times, figuring out who's at fault is difficult, but figuring out who's responsible is easy. We all are. And as blame is a path to nowhere, responsibility is always a pathway to a solution. I should note, as we talk about these incidences in New Orleans, that we're not talking about a terrorist attack. We're not talking about immigrants who are not from here that have committed crimes. We're talking about, we think, individuals who are from the city of New Orleans committing crimes against individuals that live in the city of New Orleans. In other words, it's all on us. On top of that, the men and women who are standing behind me, in my opinion, in the last 7 years have done heroic work under the most difficult of circumstances. Not only under a consent decree, but in the last 7 years, the terrorist threat has risen. The number of people that come into this city has gotten larger. The number of events that we have to police is greater. And given what's happened around the country, it is one of the most difficult times to be a police officer in the United States of America. So I want to commend and thank each and every one of them for the commitment that they and all of the law enforcement personnel in the city of New Orleans and our first responders have made. I also would like to note, as I have said to the president, this president and the last one, to Congress, that in the United States of America, local law enforcement is the tip of the spear, not only for terrorism, for homeland security, but public safety threats as well. And as they have in the past, this team has done a great job, and they're going to continue to do a great job, and I hope that members of the community give them the thanks that they deserve. The recent uptick that we have had in the city is very concerning, but we are going to do everything we can. We're not going to relent until we work together, not only as a police department, but as a community to make the city safer. Today, as you can see, I asked the chief and the deputy chiefs and the district commanders to come in and to brief me on the recent incidents. We have discussed strategies that the chief will talk about that are going to be deployed in each neighborhood to prevent violence, aggressively investigate and arrest violent criminals. As you know now, there were 5 separate shooting incidents this weekend with 13 shooting victims, 3 of now who are deceased. And of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families and to the friends and to the whole city for the loss of each one of those very valuable lives. Our officers in the last week made major narcotics arrests, cleared 12 armed robberies, took dozens of guns off the street, but we have to be even more proactive. So I've instructed the chief to use all the tools at his disposal to combat this surge and pledged any and all resources and support. We have Tiger units working the shootings and the armed robberies. Our multi-agency gang unit is, as always, working the most violent gangs and the groups in the city. We're also aggressively implementing our public safety and security plan that we unveiled in January. Crime cameras are being deployed in neighborhoods. Other technology to assist officers is being deployed so that they can be more proactive. I also want to say this, that no matter how big or how good this police department gets, this is much bigger than just the men and women of the NOPD. We have historically been, and we continue to be, unfortunately, a very violent city. And if we are going to change the culture of violence in this city, we're going to have to change who we are, and how we act. And I'm talking about from house to house, from neighborhood to neighborhood, from church to church, from community to community, because if we don't change the culture and the things that actually help create violence, the police officers are going to continue to have as much work as they have today. So it is not just on them. It really is on all of us in the city on a macro level and on a micro level. And on the micro level, let me say this, 822-1111. Put it in your phone, 822-1111. In this age of social media, it's impossible to believe that there are no witnesses to these crimes. And no matter how hard these men and women work, we cannot do our job if people will not come forward. We know who they are. They're our sons, they're our daughters, they're our brothers, they're our sisters, they're our neighbors. The individuals that are committing these crimes are known to us, and people know them. And unless people are willing to come forward, it makes it that much more difficult for us to provide the kind of public safety that we need. So I just want to know that the public should know that we're working overtime, we're working full-time, we're going to be relentless. This is what we spend most of our time on all of the time in the city of New Orleans. We're going to continue to do so until our city becomes a city of safety, but it's going to take all of us to do it. So I want to turn it over to the Chief. Again, Chief, thank you for all of your work. To the men and women of the police department, thank you again for all the work that you have done. I have a lot of faith and confidence in all of you, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that the city's safe. Chief Harrison.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you know, we've seen a startling uptick in violence this week, but our officers, led by the men and women who are with us today, will not be deterred. And we will remain committed to getting these violent criminals off the streets and putting an end to the shooting and to the death. We're certainly working in cooperation with the FBI to solve the armored car murder and robbery, and we're committing more overtime to the 1st District to continue to expand their presence on the Tulane Avenue corridor. The 1st District made a commitment to provide an increased presence in this area, and we have not wavered, even with our other neighborhood groups' demand for this sort of enforcement and deployment. We're continuing and increasing police presence along the Tulane corridor, providing additional overtime on top of the units that are already assigned to that area. As a matter of fact, the response to Friday night's incident came from units who were within earshot, already deployed to that immediate area, and were within a half a block when the violence erupted. We've canceled all non-mandatory training to focus and maximize our manpower on violent crime. We're being very proactive, and we're getting guns off the street. To that point, we took 41 guns off of the street just this week. We've taken a total of 777 guns off the street so far this year, compared to 640 last year, which is a 21% increase, and a 25% increase in gun arrest this time compared to last year. Since the beginning of October 2016, NOPD has increased our proactive enforcement in a very, very focused and strategic manner. Field interviews for suspicious persons or vehicles have increased 18%. Self-initiated traffic stops citywide have increased 8%. Self-initiated drug stops citywide increased 20%. Self-initiated traffic stops in areas of gun violence increased 12%. Self-initiated drug stops in areas of gun violence increased 21%. In March, we expanded our Tiger Unit, which had success last year, bringing down armed robberies to focus on shootings. The Tiger Unit shooting team now has made 18 arrests, including 4 felony narcotics cases, seized a dozen firearms linked to multiple crimes. On Thursday, June 1st, we had a major narcotics arrest, where the 1st District officers arrested Quince Williams in possession with intent to distribute crack cocaine, ecstasy. He was also in possession of an illegal firearm. This week, on May 30th, 6th District detectives arrested Fernell Luckett, whom we believe is responsible for at least 5 armed robberies, 4 of them in May alone this year. So we appeal to our community to step up, to speak out. Our officers are working tirelessly, putting their lives on the line, but we're working hard to stop the violence, to prevent the violence, and to hold people accountable who are committing these acts of violence. We ask you to stand with us. We ask you to speak up, to step up, to join the fight, and to end the silence. And I'll reiterate what the mayor said. Crime Stoppers is a great tool where you can give us information anonymously, 822-1111. And to those out there who are committing violence, let me just speak directly to you. You will not get away with it. We will catch you, and you will pay for the crimes you have committed and the horror you have committed against the victims of our citizens. Right. Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Can you tell us a little bit about the type of event that was occurring prior to the Mid-City shooting early Saturday? And a follow-up to that question, what is that facility exactly, and is it permitted for events? What do we know about that facility and what was going on there at the time?
So we know a little bit about that facility. It's a a dual purpose. It's connected to another business, but it is to our understanding that there was a party going on there that perhaps should not have been working as a place to host a party. We had officers go out there when we knew that the crowd was getting really big. 2 of them were there. The commander standing here with us has been assigning officers to that area every night of the week, knowing that we had problems historically from that area. Those officers were moving cars out of the way and clearing the area when the actual violence erupted. They were actually heard it, called it in, and then we responded to it.
Do you have any idea of how many people were there that night? It seemed 200.
We don't have an exact number of how many people were there.
Chief, were they in the process of shutting the party down? Do officers have that power if an unpermitted party seems
Yes, they have that power, but they were out there moving the traffic out of the street, trying to eliminate the danger factor. And so what they were doing at that time was just making sure that the area could be safe, getting the cars out of the street, moving the people along, clearing that area from the vehicular and pedestrian traffic that was outside at the very moment.
Next.
Anything else?
Police can arrest all the people they want, but what's the underlying problem here?
Let me try to talk about that. I've spoken about this a lot. There is a culture of violence in this city. There is obviously a law enforcement component to do that and a criminal justice system component. But if we continue to create the conditions that violence grows in, where there is excess alcohol, excess drugs, individuals that are not taking responsibility for themselves, we could chase them all over the place, and witnesses that don't come forward, and it's never going to get any better. So there are deep underlying problems that have produced this level of violence in the city of New Orleans since the beginning of our time until today. From time to time, the numbers go up, they go down, but they've still been consistently high per capita over a very, very long period of time. And of course, I've given innumerable speeches on this particular subject, which is why I continue to want to call the people of this city into purpose. No matter what mayor's standing here, no matter what police chief is standing here, if we don't get to the root cause of violence, of drugs and all of the other things that are causing it, we're going to continue to have the level of violence. Now, we have a couple of things happening right now that are making this worse than it normally would be. The opioid crisis is absolutely adding to the spike that we see in the number of shootings that we have. And, of course, you see that happening all over the country. And you see from city to city, each city is having difficult issues. But New Orleans has always been at the top of that very, very bad list. And until we get to the root causes of it, separate and distinct from what NOPD does, we're going to continue to have this culture of violence. And at the end of the day, as I have said when I started this, we know who the shooters are. We collectively, as a city, there's somebody's brother, there's somebody's sister, there's somebody aunt or uncle. We know. We've got to have a zero tolerance for this and come together as a city if we're ever going to stop it. And it's got to happen from house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood, church to church, right? And then the entire city as well.
We had 2 confirmed that night. A 3rd person expired at the hospital later that next morning. So it's 3 confirmed now.
Chief Harrison, you worked under Richard Pennington, who came in here 23 years ago and proclaimed he was going to cut the murder rate in half. Why not just adopt that template that he used to do that?
Well, first of all, there are many, many parts to what he did. And so I was certainly not the chief. I was a young police officer when Chief Pennington came. But Chief Pennington also had a department of 1,600 police officers at his disposal at that time. And things were very, very different. And so he was able to create a number of things that he had the ability to create. And so we're doing some of the same things that administration did. It's not that very different. Technology has evolved, and we're doing a lot of what he did back then, introducing a lot of technology, best practices, strong constitutional policing, police reform. So much of what he did, we're doing here in the police department now. Just with the evolution of technology, we're doing it bigger, better, stronger, and faster.
And Rob, as of now, the murder rate is half of what it was in 1996, and it's 24% lower than when it was when we got here. So that has been maintained. It's actually been maintained nationwide, and it's been maintained in the city, even on a per capita basis. So whether or not, as a country, that was, what happened during that period of time, you're seeing it stay steady there. It's going up a little bit or going down. But again, getting to the root cause of it is the thing, eventually, that is the most important thing.
Chief, that 3rd confirmed death, what shooting was that?
That's the Tulane Avenue shooting death.
All right, we're good? All right, you guys,
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
All right. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.